We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. We're continuing the conversation with Liberty Nation's senior political analyst, Tim Donner. Now, Tim, we've just been talking about Tim Walz and how he's essentially a man with nothing to lose politically. He's at the end of his political career. There's a good chance that, especially after having the prospect of Joe Biden and Donald Trump fighting it out for the White House again, that an older white man is unlikely to be topping a ticket anytime soon. So this is a good chance for him to get some glory. But what does he bring to the Harris ticket electorally? Because he's from Minnesota. Joe Biden won that 7 points in 2020.
Yeah, it's not a swing state. So he doesn't get you a swing state. He doesn't get you moderate Democrats and people in the middle and left-leaning independents or centrist independents. He doesn't give you anything in the South. He's not going to help in Georgia or Arizona or North Carolina or Nevada. He might have been of some use in the upper Midwest, except for the fact that Donald Trump already has the quintessential heartland success, rags to riches story in J.D. Vance. He's nothing if not the quintessential heartlander. So I don't see any advantage in picking Walz for that reason either. And this begs the question of what he does bring to the ticket. Generally speaking, and it's always been a successful strategy, not that every candidate that's followed it has won, but you try to balance off your weaknesses and vulnerabilities when you pick a vice presidential candidate. As I said on LibertyNation.com, that was the only thing conventional about Donald Trump in 2016 was that he picked a man in Mike Pence who gave him cover with conservatives and Christians. Barack Obama picked Joe Biden because he needed street cred with the DC establishment. So did Ronald Reagan when he picked George H.W. Bush. These things are always done, even with wildly unsuccessful candidates like Michael Dukakis, who understood that as a Northeast liberal in 1988, he definitely needed to soften that image, and he picked a conservative Democrat from Texas, Lloyd Benson, to be his running mate. But I don't see a single advantage to picking Tim Walz, as hard as I try, except possibly for the fact that by balancing off a woman of color with a white man
that's very surface level, isn't it?
In a time of identity politics, maybe that means something, but I think it's an extremely weak choice. Just looking objectively at it, had probably 5 other candidates on his list of 6 that would have helped a lot more than Tim Walz, and certainly wouldn't have relitigated the 2020 summer in Minneapolis, which Kamala Harris already had a lot of explaining to do about, and now partnering with a man who stood by and did nothing as his capital city burned and his wife opened the window to enjoy the smell of burning tires. It's incomprehensible to me, but I think that she figures it's just the safest choice for the far left because they're the loudest voices in the room.
I think that's the key there, Tim. I reckon you've hit the nail on the head. It's essentially ideologically cemented the progressive left as the de facto power voice in the Democratic Party stable.
No question.
So you've got Kamala Harris, who, according to the now deleted records that were kept on her thing, she was the most liberal senator for at least one of the years she was in the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got...
And Bernie Sanders apparently was pretty upset because he
wanted to be the most
1 year. Yeah, he only finished second behind Kamala.
So you've got that, and then you've got Tim Walz, who driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. You've got um,
I mean, this guy,
voting rights for
the first thing he did,
5,000 felons.
the first executive order he signed was to form a council on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mm.
We know that he did nothing during the riots. He supported defunding the police. He cut the Minneapolis police force by 40%. He has his own carbon-free agenda. He has ordered that Minnesota become carbon-free by 2040. He wants convicted felons to be able to vote. He wants illegal aliens to receive free health care, free college. I mean, it's a full laundry list of progressive policies.
Absolutely. Now, here's something I want you to consider, Tim. We've seen this week Cori Bush, squad member in the House, Missouri squad member, and she lost her primary challenge, her primary contest to win a third term in the House, following in the footsteps of Jamal Bowman of New York, who won in the small district of the Bronx, but in the larger, was it Westchester, he lost pretty much everything. So he's out. You've got Cori Bush out. The squad of 5 is now 40% down, or will be 40% down at least come the next Congress. And what this tells me is that people who, because it's Democrats who are voting in these primaries, what this signifies to me, maybe not tells me, but signifies to me, is that Democrat Party, the voters at large, are not in with both feet to this anti-Israel, pro-Palestine, which certainly is tangentially pro-Hamas.
Certainly not.
And they're not into it. And so, and they're willing to cast a vote for people who are not pushing that particular agenda. So that makes me
now, you know,
what a bad decision this might be for Kamala Harris.
It leaves voters with no choice. In other words, you either vote progressive or you vote conservative.
Or you stay home.
If he had picked someone who would serve as a moderating influence on her governance, there'd kind of be something for everyone, including people in the middle, looking for an alternative to Donald Trump. But that's out the window now because, look, they tried to target the Nikki Haley voters, did the Kamala Harris campaign just like Joe Biden did. But Nikki Haley came out yesterday and said, or what she actually said was a win for open borders socialism and Iran. That doesn't sound like a woman who is approving of the candidate who is being sort of lifted up in her name as a moderate alternative to Donald Trump. She's off the map now, and that's a crucial coalition that they're going to miss is the Haley voters.
Let's talk about another coalition very briefly, Tim. Last question for you. If Kamala Harris and Tim Walz win the presidency in November, they'll be looking at the talent pool within the Democratic Party, and that's a very deep bench. There's a lot of talent in that bench. There's a lot of people to choose from. Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, even Pete Buttigieg to some degree. But all of these people who may have had aspirations for a higher office, they now have to wait 8 years. And that essentially means, as far as I can tell, that's that if Kamala Harris wins, of course, that means that their political hopes are over because Kamala Harris has gotten the top spot without a primary. And now many of these people might have challenged if there was an open primary against Kamala Harris. So how much goodwill do you think she's going to have going into a presidency if she wins?
Well, I'll tell you what was remarkable about her rollout was that it was in Philadelphia. And so everybody assumed it would be Josh Shapiro as her pick. He came out. He delivered a beautiful stemwinder. He had everybody on their feet, and it just reminded everybody again what might have been, while lifting Josh Shapiro to perhaps near front-running status for 2028.
And that's a good time to wrap it up. Tim Donner, thanks ever so much.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.